Three's the Charm by MissCHSparkles, Chapter 14. The first year's Professor McGonagall, Hagrid said respectively, and she nodded. Thank you, Hagrid. Follow me, everyone. They all trooped after her, Hagrid somehow managing to melt away into the Great Hall, and taken to a side chamber. Professor McGonagall then turned and regarded them sternly, but not unkindly, although you could really tell this if you knew her. Harry remembered just being a little terrified of her. She just looked so no-nonsense and very likely to squash any mischief. She was wearing her usual emerald green robes, with the McGonagall tartan sash of pink, purple and light brown. Welcome to Hogwarts, she began what sounded like a very well-rehearsed speech. Our start-of-term banquet will begin very shortly, but first there are a few things you should know. Firstly, before you can join the feast, you must be sorted into your houses. The sorting ceremony is extremely important, as your house will be something like your family while you are here at Hogwarts. This made Harry smile, recalling just how true this had been for him. Even when times were bad, Gryffindor had always been family and home to him. This wasn't quite the same for Ron and Hermione. They both had families who were alive and who loved them. You will attend classes with your fellow housemates, sleep in your house dormitory, and be able to spend your free time in your house common room. The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn you house points, and any rule-breaking will lose house points. The trio thought of all the points they had won and lost. Was it a record? At the end of the school year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honour. I hope each of you will be a credit to whichever house becomes yours. Many students stood a little straighter at this, mainly those who had already had a house in mind. The other students just looked overwhelmed by all of this, even those who had already known about the houses. Hermione fidgeted slightly. She really wanted to comfort the other first years and assure them they had nothing to worry about. As far as they were aware, all of their year had been happy with their allocated houses. The sorting ceremony will begin momentarily. Until then you must wait in this room, and perhaps take the opportunity to smarten yourselves up a bit. She didn't look at Ron because he didn't have a smudged nose this time around. Poor Neville was fidgeting with his cloak, wasn't very neat, but Professor McGonagall never purposefully stared at a single student. Harry automatically had a go at flattening his hair. He didn't relish the prospect of all those eyes staring at him, which for them would be the very first and definitely not the very last time. As Hermione smoothed down her robes, Professor McGonagall said, I shall return when we are ready for you. Please wait quietly. When she was gone, everyone relaxed and started murmuring among themselves. This is weird, Ron murmured to Harry. Bloody déjà vu. I know what you mean, Harry murmured back. Didn't George say we had to do a painful test or something? Nah, that was Fred, Ron said as Hermione stepped a little closer to them. He said we'd have to wrestle or trowel. Well, he was telling the truth, she teased in a low voice so no one could hear her. We did end up wrestling a troll. Heckling more like. Ron disagreed with a grin. Harry's the only one who had a go at tackling it. And that's something I have no intention of repeating, Harry stated firmly, just as the ghosts appeared, making nearly everyone scream. The trio, of course, barely noticed, even as the ghosts loudly argued about Peeves. Harry had told the others of the Grey Ladies' and Bloody Barons' history during their exchange of letters. They had been amazed at the story. It was a true tragedy of betrayal and regret. At least there was one Horcrux they could easily retrieve, although destroying it would be another matter. They weren't too worried. They would find a way, and were satisfied that no one would discover the Horcrux. Hope to see you in Hufflepuff, the Friar was just saying. My old house, you know. Come along now, came Professor McGonagall as she suddenly appeared back in the room. The sorting ceremony is about to start. Here we go, Ron said with a harsh sigh. He was nervous about the sorting. What if the Sorting Hat insisted on splitting them up? Yep, was all Harry said, as they formed a line under Professor McGonagall's instruction. Harry had placed himself in front, feeling that he should be brave the Great Hall first, with Hermione behind him and Ron behind her. As one, all the first years followed Professor McGonagall into the dazzling Great Hall, lit by hundreds of gently floating candles. Harry remembered being nervous of dripping wax, but despite the fact hot wax did run down their sides, they never dropped onto the heads of the students. They just seemed to pool at the bases, spreading out like a ripple of water. They were led between two long tables, which each had a long table on either side. Each table was laid with beautifully glittering gold goblets and plates, and students hungrily waiting on benches for the sorting ceremony to be over and the feast to start. Harry just stared straight ahead. He wanted to be just another first year for as long as possible. The ghosts were now hovering all over the place, casting misty silver glows over the nearby students. Overhead, the ceiling revealed a velvety sky dotted with bright silver stars, which shimmered slightly as he watched. He quickly focused on the person in front of him. No point in stumbling around like an idiot. As they reached the end of the tables and formed a huddle at the front of the staff table, where all the staff was watching them carefully. Before they could focus on anyone, Professor McGonagall suddenly appeared with a four-legged stool that she placed on the ground, before placing on that a rather ratty and rather dirty-looking hat. Harry had always wondered why no one had bothered to clean it. "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty," the hat began after a slit opened near the brim. The trio smiled as they listened to the merry song, a sharp contrast to the one they had heard in the last couple of years at Hogwarts. They couldn't even imagine how grim the one during their 7th year must have been. The house extolled the virtues of the different houses, and each house cheered when theirs was mentioned. When the Sorting Hat finally finished, everyone cheered and clapped, causing the Raggedy Hat to bow before becoming completely still. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted." Professor McGonagall now said, "Abbott Hannah." The scene played out as Harry remembered it. Professor McGonagall would say a name, the student would stumble tremulously onto the stool, before the hat was placed on their heads. After either a moment's pause or a few minutes' deliberation, the hat would call out the name of their house. No one went to a different house, meaning there were no surprises, until it was finally Hermione's turn. "Granger, Hermione." "Good luck," Harry murmured as Hermione stepped forward and headed for the hat. Harry and Ron couldn't hear what the hat was saying to their friend, but it was certainly different from the usual conversations the hat had had with the students. "Well, well, well, what's this? According to your memory, we have met before, Miss Granger." "Yes, we have," Hermione thought back nervously. "Interesting. I've never met a student who has gone back to their first-year body before. And what's this? There are more of you?" "Just 2 more," Hermione assured, "and we all know where we want to go." "Gryffindor, same as last time," the house mused. "Well, while I am glad you liked my choice the first time, there are other houses to choose from. Many times I am forced to sort students into a certain house, merely because their family went there. But they could have done better in a different house." "I know," Hermione agreed. "I can imagine that happening, but I think in this case you made the right choice. I know that we all could do well in the other houses, but we really feel like Gryffindor is the best choice. You'll be able to talk to the others, but if you could please put me where I want." "If you're sure you know what you're doing," the house cautioned before saying, "but you are most definitely brave and bold. You will be a credit to your house. Again!" "Gryffindor!" was the cry that echoed through the Great Hall, and the Gryffindor started cheering as the hat was plucked from Hermione's head so she could run to the Gryffindor table. "Thank bloody Merlin," Ron said with relief. He had been worried the Sorting Hat would insist on putting her in Ravenclaw. They watched as their fellow students were sorted, including poor Neville, who had tripped on the way there and then ran to the Gryffindor table while still wearing the hat. Then there was Draco Malfoy, who swaggered over to the hat and was sorted almost immediately. He seemed to have regained his confidence, although he still shot Harry and Ron a calculated look. Or at least, he hoped he did. To the NEWT students, it just looked a little silly. More students were placed. There was more clapping. And the number of thirstiers in the huddle steadily dwindled. Harry tried not to grimace. In a few moments his identity would be revealed, and everyone would start pointing and whispering. He'd really enjoyed being just another person, not somebody famous. But at least he could deal with it better than this time around. He wouldn't have to deal with that strange sick feeling when people acted weird around him, which had been the worst bit about being famous. "Looks like it's almost you," Ron muttered, and Harry saw he was right. Sally Ann Perks was currently being sorted, and he was right after her. "Ravenclaw!" shouted the Hat, as Sally Ann hurried to her new house. Professor McGonagall called out the next name. "Potter, Harry!" Sharing a brief glance with Ron, Harry stepped forward as excited whispers broke out. "Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter?" "Yes, it's him," thought Harry rather sarcastically, even though he knew they didn't mean any harm. That didn't mean he couldn't be a little annoyed about it. "Ah, you're the one of the others Miss Granger spoke of," the Hat instantly said as soon as it went over his eyes. "Interesting. Very interesting." "Well, that's better than being difficult," Harry thought wryly as he heard the Hat chuckle. "You're still difficult in a way, Mr. Potter. If you didn't have a definite house in mind, I might have had a lot of trouble sorting you. You would still do well in Slytherin, you know." "I know," Harry thought, but this time without fear or being offended. "But I still think Gryffindor's the right choice. Although I did give Slytherin some serious thought. But how many Slytherins could pull that sword out?" "Aha! So you know my little secret," the Hat chuckled. "Yes, if I do say so. That was one of Godric Gryffindor's more brilliant ideas. It has only appeared a few times before in the past." "It happened to a couple of others," Harry thought quietly. "Me and Neville." "Ah, yes, Mr. Longbottom. He was an interesting one to sort. Poor boy was convinced he wouldn't go anywhere. But I could have easily placed him in Hufflepuff. He is a very loyal boy. But I could see within the extraordinary potential to become something great, even though he didn't believe me. I can well understand how he would manage to pull the hat out. He does possess great bravery that will show itself when it is most greatly needed." "I know," Harry thought, remembering all those times Neville's true brave self had shown forth. "And we'll look after him, help him see what he really is." "That would be good. The poor boy needs someone to tell him that," the Hat stated sorrowfully. "But I sense there's something you want me to do." "Yeah," Harry chuckled. "Could you not tell Professor Dumbledore what you saw? This is something we need to do on our own, at least for now. I know he has our best interests at heart, but it would be better if he was kept in the dark for the moment." "I can see why," the Hat agreed. "Very well, Mr. Potter. I shall do as you ask, as I can see you want to do much good, including bringing the houses together. Just don't forget to ask for help if you truly need it." And Harry knew the Hat wasn't just meaning telling Professor Dumbledore if things got out of hand. He also meant the sword. "I'll do it. Don't worry," he assured the Hat, who whispered back, "Good luck, Mr. Potter." "Gryffindor!" As the hat came off his head, he could see people had been staring at him, no doubt wondering what was taking so long. There was a pause, and then the Gryffindor table burst into cheers, and Hagrid sent him a big beam and thumbs up. Harry sent him a smile back before heading to a free place. "Why didn't you tell us you were Harry Potter?" the twins demanded, as Harry sat opposite Hermione after shaking Percy's hand. Harry shrugged. "I'm still getting used to being Harry Potter." The twins stared at him, not understanding that at all. However, they just shrugged and turned back to watch the rest of the sorting. There were only a small group left, and it wasn't long until Ron's name was called. "Weasley Ronald!" "He'll be fine," Harry whispered to Hermione, who looked nervous again. She smiled at him as they watched the hat was placed on Ron's head. "And here is the last one," the Hat said sardonically. "You are just as interesting as the last two." "Really?" Ron thought, surprised. "Most definitely, Mr. Weasley," the Hat replied firmly. "You're very relieved your friends are in Gryffindor, because you care about them so much, and want to look after them." "Because I didn't do a very good job the first time," Ron mumbled, almost painfully. "You made a mistake," the Hat corrected. "But what I can see,
You've always stuck by your friends and looked after them, even when things are bad. And the point is, despite certain mistakes, you have always come back and done your damnedest to put things right. Believe me, not many could do that and make their friendship even stronger. I saw your friends' minds and how they care for you. As a brother for Mr. Potter, and something much more for Miss Granger. Just keep doing what you are doing, Mr. Weasley, and you'll be fine. Never forget your friends could not have got this far without you.
As Ron digested this, the Hat continued.
Despite what you may think, I could have put you in at least another house. But I truly believe you belong in Gryffindor!
Still looking rather bemused, Ron slid off the stool and headed for the table, to the side Harry was sitting on.
Well done, Ron. Excellent,
Percy said pompously across from Harry. Thanks, Percy, Ron said with a smile as his body relaxed, and he grinned at Harry and Hermione. That wasn't so bad. No, it was rather interesting, Hermione agreed, as Blaise Zabini was sorted into Slytherin. Dumbledore now stood up, spreading his hands and beaming at them all. Harry smiled to himself. It was so good to see Dumbledore back in his proper place, alive and healthy. Some might have held it against the headmaster for what he had done, but really, how else could he have gotten rid of that Horcrux? At least by Voldemort killing him. He had an incredible advantage when he came back, in that Voldemort had no idea he was alive, and therefore lowered his guard completely. Dumbledore hadn't wanted him to die. He had wanted him to live, but in the end it had been Harry's choice to live.
Welcome, he said. Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words, and here they are. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak.
Harry laughed out loud. He had forgotten those mad things Dumbledore liked to say.
Thank you,
Dumbledore said graciously, to applause, and sat down as the table suddenly filled with food, making all the first years gasp in astonishment. The trio grinned at each other before helping themselves to the delicious food on offer. Plenty of vegetables, meats, sauces, gravy, Yorkshire pudding, salad, cheeses, and many other mouth-watering foods. By the way, I'm hungry. That sounds good. This time Harry grabbed a handful of peppermint humbugs to eat at a later date. They would be nice sucking on during class. After all, he needed to start acting like a real first year.
That does look good,
Sir Nick sighed, as they all treated to the usual routine of Nearly Headless Nick introducing himself before someone asked why he was called Nearly Headless, and then the ghost demonstrating just why. Harry grinned at some of the faces. You always were rather disgusted the first time, but everyone quickly got used to the Gryffindor ghost. Harry glanced over to the Slytherin ghost and spied the bloody Baron hovering about, unsmiling and not talking to him. It was strange to think he knew how the bloody Baron got those bloodstains. It was something every student wanted to know, but few dared to ask him. Harry also sent a sneaky glance to the staff table, where all the teachers were eating and talking to each other. Dumbledore was tucking into what looked like roast beef with gravy, while listening to Professor McGonagall. Quirrell was nervously putting food on his plate, occasionally twitching, and now wearing that ridiculous purple turban. But the real shock was Professor Snape, who was eating like the others, and only occasionally checking the students. He just looked so young compared to how Harry had last seen him. He had to swallow as he remembered the last time he had seen Snape, bleeding to death from that horrid neck wound. And his staring black eyes, devoid of even the merest spark of life, which had probably freaked him out the most. But now Snape was missing all those lines of age, and stress that he had developed over the 7 years Harry had known him, and actually looked like a young man. He was still rather unpleasant to look at, with greasy black hair, sallow skin, and a scowling expression. But it was good to see him alive. Harry did want to make an effort with the potions master, but seeing him brought back all the unpleasant memories of his interactions with the man. He'd need to create some better ones, fast, or it would be incredibly difficult to be civil to him. He looked away quickly. If he stared too long, Snape would notice him, and likely shoot him a nasty glare. Dinner passed well, Most people were eating rather than talking, and it was only when dessert appeared that people really started to speak. Ice cream in every flavour, different pies, jelly, rice puddings, eclairs, spotted dick, jam roly-poly pudding, jam donuts, strawberries, and many more. Again, I'm hungry. Stop taunting my sweet tooth. As Harry helped himself to his favourite, treacle tart, people started to talk about their families. I'm half and half. Seamus said, "Me dad's a muggle. My mum didn't tell him she was a witch till after they were married. Bit of a nasty shock for him." People laughed at this, but Harry grimaced. Snape's father had been a muggle, and from what little he had seen, hadn't been pleased to find out about magic. Harry could only guess at what happened, but Snape had clearly had an unpleasant childhood. While Seamus's father had obviously accepted what his wife and son were, others hadn't been so tolerant. "What about you, Neville?" Dean asked after explaining that his mum and sisters were muggle, but they lived with his muggle stepdad, meaning he wasn't sure if he was a muggle-born or a half-blood, as his dad had disappeared after he had been born. "Well, my gran brought me up, and she's a witch," Neville said, "but the family thought I was all muggle for ages." The trio shared looks at this. They knew why Neville had been brought up by his grandmother, and how he had been told his whole life he wasn't as good as his parents, but somehow he must outshine them. "My great-uncle Algy kept trying to catch me off my guard and force the magic out of me. He pushed me off the end of Blackhall Pier once. I nearly drowned." Hermione choked before spitting out a mouthful of pumpkin juice as she stared in horror at Neville as Percy vanished the mess she had made. Harry was also staring. Everything had been such a new experience the first time that he hadn't really put much thought into Neville's words, but now he was. And so was Ron, if that frown was anything to go by. "But nothing happened until I was 8. Great-uncle Algy came round for dinner, and he was hanging me out of the upstairs window by the ankles, when my great-auntie Enid offered him a meringue, and he accidentally let go. But I bounced, all the way down the garden and into the road. They were all really pleased. Gran was crying, she was so happy." "Oh my goodness, that's horrible!" Hermione exclaimed, causing those around her to stare. As Neville was too alarmed to speak, Percy asked, "What's horrible?" Ignoring Ron, who was shaking his head at her, she said, "What Neville's great-uncle Algy did. That's nothing short of abuse." "Abuse?" Neville repeated, very confused. "Yes!" Hermione stated almost shrilly, astonished that nearly everyone was giving her bemused looks. "Neville, you just said he nearly killed you. And for what? To prove you had magic? What if you didn't have magic and he had died?" Neville just stared at her with wide eyes, so Harry quickly said, What Hermione's trying to say is that if anyone did that in the Muggle world, they'd be arrested, or at the very least banned from contact with the kid in question." "They would?" Neville asked in amazement, as Dean said, "Oh yeah, I heard a story on the news about a kid who was getting beat up by their stepdad, but he finally got arrested when someone reported it. Don't you guys have police?" "We have magical law enforcement," Ron stated, who knew enough by now to give the wizarding equivalent of police. "And auras, dark wizard catchers, for the really serious criminals and stuff." As Dean nodded with interest, Neville just said, "But he's not beating me or anything. He was trying to catch some magic out of me." "But why didn't he just wait for you to show magic on your own?" was Hermione's demand. "If you had magic, you had magic. And if you didn't have magic, you didn't. What does forcing you to perform magic achieve?" Neville stammered. He had no idea how to answer those questions. "Hey, maybe we could talk about this another time," Ron interjected. "The point is, you are a wizard, and you're in the best house there is. Gryffindor." There was a murmur of agreement as Ron took the opportunity to hiss at Hermione. "Drop it," quickly adding as she shot him a severe look, "Not now. We'll talk later." She had a rather stubborn look on her face, but seeing how distressed Neville looked, nodded her agreement. "I'm sorry, Neville. I guess things are very different in the wizarding world." She apologised to Neville, who looked very relieved. "That's okay," he assured her timidly. "I can't imagine how things are in the Muggle world. Must be pretty weird." Her smile was a little forced, but she managed it. Ron filled the silence by quickly giving a description of his family, with distracted everyone, as his family was massive by both wizarding and muggling standards. Harry honestly felt sick as he imagined how Neville had been abused and mistreated, but the welcoming feast was not the place to discuss it. They'd need to go on this as soon as possible, but avoid scaring Neville off. Harry wanted to be the boys' friend, but he also didn't want Neville being terrified with them if they came on too strong. "Hey, Harry," Ron muttered, giving Harry a subtle nudge. "Snape's watching you." Harry resisted the urge to turn around, knowing he would be met with a glare of loathing. "For long?" he whispered back. "Nah, just for a few moments, but he doesn't look happy," Ron stated quietly, adding, "I think Hermione got his attention. He's giving us all a look. Oh wait, Quirrell just started stuttering something, so he's not looking anymore." Trusting his friend, Harry shot the staff table a sneaky look, and saw that Snape was indeed not paying the Gryffindor table any attention. He looked grumpy, but after 7 years of being taught by the man, Harry knew that, for Snape, that was a rather neutral expression. Harry turned back to his pudding, helping himself to some Crackashan ice cream, a delicious mixture of oats, honey and raspberries. I've never heard of that before, but that sounds really nice. But, I'm not particularly looking forward to potions, but at least Snape did teach us stuff. Harry sighed. "It's gonna be a nightmare listening to Quirrell." "We'll just have to get rid of him then," Ron said, as though it was obvious. This made Harry laugh, but he didn't say anything else. You never knew who was listening in. The rest of the feast passed pleasantly until everyone was full and very satisfied. The remains of the feast all vanished, prompting Dumbledore to stand up to give his start-of-year announcements.
"Now that we are all fed and watered, I have a few start-of-term notices for your attention. First, you should note that the forest on the grounds is forbidden to all pupils, and for a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well."
The trio caught each other's eyes and grinned while the Weasley twins sent their headmaster very innocent looks. After giving them a twinkle, Dumbledore continued.
"I have also been asked by Mr. Filch, the caretaker, to remind you all that no magic should be used between classes in the corridors. Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of the term. Anyone interested in playing for their house teams should contact Madame Hooch."
This made Harry smile. He wasn't sure yet if he'd be able to join the Gryffindor team yet, but it was worth considering.
"And finally, I must tell you that this year, the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death."
This caused a lot of mutterings in the hall, but Harry didn't bother to ask Percy this time what Dumbledore meant.
"And now for the school song!"
The trio laughed along with some of the older students as they spotted the look on the other teachers' faces. As soon as the words were formed using golden ribbons, they happily sung it with the other students. Once the Weasley twins were finally finished with their funeral marching tune, Dumbledore wiped his eyes, saying, "Ah, music. A magic beyond all we do here. And now, bedtime. Off you trot." Everyone trooped off to bed, the first years following Percy, and were only briefly waylaid by Peeves the poltergeist. Ron managed to neatly shove Neville out of the way when Peeves tried to drop his walking sticks on him, causing the shy boy to gratefully mumble his thanks. As soon as they reached their common room, Harry hissed to Hermione, "We'll talk when everyone's gone to bed." She nodded her agreement, before following the first-year girls to their dormitory. Harry and Ron automatically headed to go there, grinning as they beheld their golden red four-poster beds. Their luggage was already there, including Scabbers still snoozing away in his cage with a little dish of food and a bottle of water. Ron grimaced at the sight, but quickly decided to ignore it. Along with Neville, Dean and Seamus, they changed into their pyjamas before getting into bed. However, while the other three boys quickly fell asleep, Ron and Harry somehow managed to stay awake despite how full they were. "This is going well so far," Ron hissed at Harry, who nodded. "Yeah, let's hope it stays that way." Once about half an hour had passed, they snuck down to the common room, where a fire was merrily crackling. Taking the most comfortable chairs, they waited for Hermione to join them, and she didn't disappoint. "Sorry I took so long," she said as she hurried over to them. "The girls wanted to chat for a bit. They've only just fallen asleep." "No problem," Ron said lazily. Hermione nodded, taking a seat before bursting out. Did you hear what Neville was saying about his relatives? I can't believe it. I know, Harry said darkly. I didn't like it either, but that wasn't the place to talk about it. It was just upsetting Neville, and we don't want to spoil the feast for him. Hermione looked chastised, and Harry assured her, but we will do something. Isn't that right, Ron? Yeah, but it might not be easy, Ron said darkly. Unless his relatives actually caused him serious injury or used a dark spell on him, I don't think there's really any law against it. I remember Mum and Dad talking about these families that force their kids to show magic as early as possible. And what happens if they don't? Remember that wizard who turned his 7 squib sons into hedgehogs? That's completely legal. I know, but it's so frustrating, Hermione said angrily. I bought a basic book on wizard law, and there's no mention of laws protecting abuse victims. How can that be? Pretty bloody difficult to prove abuse, Ron said wisely. You can modify your victims' memories, control them with spells and potions and all kinds of things. Yeah, and let's face it, Harry added, for better and worse, wizard kids are under their parents' control for at least 11 years, and their interaction with others depends on who their parents let them be with. Half-bloods and muggle-borns can go to school, so the authorities are more likely to pick up on abuse. But I think some purebloods can be in some pretty bad situations. But what can we do? Insisted Hermione. We have to do something, or it'll take years for Neville to throw off the abuse. Longer than it should. We could try speaking to Professor McGonagall, Harry suggested. She can easily handle Neville's gran, and she might be able to advise us. Well, we can try, Ron said with a shrug. I don't think Great Uncle Algy ever did anything to Neville, apart from getting him that hideous plant. What they did had lasting effects, Hermione said very grimly, constantly telling Neville he wasn't good enough. He believed them wholeheartedly. It was only when Bellatrix escaped that he really broke free of that mindset. And having a wand that wasn't his probably didn't help, Harry murmured, remembering how much Neville had improved in 6th year. We'll sort something out, Hermione. Don't worry. She nodded before asking with concern. You're feeling all right, aren't you, Harry? Quirrell isn't hurting your scar? Nothing yet, but I haven't directly looked at him, Harry confirmed. Speaking of which, the fence is going to be a pain in the arse with him. I know what you mean, she said, sighing heavily. If only we could get rid of him sooner rather than later. But how are we going to do that without Quirrell blasting us? Harry asked. I have an idea, Ron said slowly. It might just work. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this one. I love that they're rallying around Neville. I mean, with him being petrified at the end of the first book, it was almost like a missed opportunity. He would have recognised the Devil's Snare instantly. And I love that they're just bucking up for him. I love that. And again, the descriptions of food. I'm not due dinner for over an hour and I'm hungry, so I'm going to go and get myself a cheeky little snack. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, yada yada yada. Bye guys!